the new Next.js layouts feature is either gonna make it or break it. You might be wondering, what do I mean by that? Well, there's a bit of a story behind this and some context that is super important before we start discussing this thing. It's like, what I want to do is I want to give you this over the shoulder picture around what I'm thinking about all of this new thing, new shiny layouts feature that Next.js is about to launch very, very soon. Well, it's definitely something a little bit controversial, but I am talking about this from a good, this is coming from a good place in my heart, right? I really like the Next.js framework. I love it. I use it all the time for my personal projects as well as the projects at my company, right? So, well, without further ado, let's get into it. To understand what I mean by Next.js layout feature making it or breaking it, well, I gotta tell you a little bit of a background. I gotta give you a little bit of a background. For that, we need to go like 21 years ago when I started coding. Okay, maybe not that far, right? So, what you need to know about me is, well, I'm Ahmad Awais. I love the purple color. You might know this through my Shades of Purple theme, and I think we are getting distracted. No, we are not. What I'm trying to share with you is that I'm an open sourcer. I love to write code, and I love to make things easier for developers. I'm right now Vice President of Developer Relations at Rapid API, right? So developer toolings, developer workflows, CLIs are things that are right up my alley, right? So I spent like 16, 17 years in the WordPress core. I hope you know what is WordPress, right? Who doesn't, right? And when I started like working with WordPress, it was this amazing cutting edge software. When everyone was working with FTPs, we had this entire plugin ecosystem. You could just go search for a plugin, and the entire PHP thing, that code base would do it all for you. WordPress got famous 5-minute install, which was a really big deal at that time. But as the time passed, JavaScript, with this new JavaScript scene, the JavaScript frameworks came around, and everything got changed. People started using JavaScript for literally everything, and I'm excited about that, right? Like, because I was the JavaScript developer in the WordPress ecosystem, right? I literally learned PHP because of WordPress, right? And so what happened is, like, maybe some of you know, not a lot, but there was this new editor experience in WordPress that we call Gutenberg, and we started working on that. We initially adopted React.js. What we didn't know at the time was that React.js wasn't really open source. It had a patent clause that you can't really compete or build anything that would compete with Facebook. And like, Facebook is everywhere, right? We didn't want to put that kind of thing in an open source DPL framework that was WordPress for half of the internet, right? So I started this GitHub issue that we were going to choose a new JavaScript framework, and everyone came around. Ivani was there. People were talking about Vue.js, React.js, and whatnot. One thing led to another, and we basically ended up convincing Facebook to relicense React.js as well as throw in GraphQL as well, and those two became big, right? But even with that, we ended up with a lot of JavaScript code inside of WordPress core, right? I don't know from the top of my head, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's more JavaScript in WordPress core now than PHP, right? Who would have guessed that? But with the start of Gutenberg, this new editing experience, new experience of writing your content with WordPress, which was based out on top of React.js, everything kind of ended up getting broken, right? Like, it was a complete shift, a mindset shift, a programming and infrastructure shift. It's just like, it's like WordPress industry was going this way, and then Gutenberg came around, and it just, there was a big crack, and everything changed afterwards, right? Some people enjoyed it a lot. Some people were like, nah, I'm not gonna use WordPress anymore because this thing is just too complicated for me right now. I could just go on, learn React on my own, and do my own thing. And others were like, no, I'm not gonna leave WordPress. I have it has such an amazing plugin and support ecosystem, right? So, well, yours truly was building developer tooling at the time as well, right? I'd built WP Gulp and I started building and launched Create Google Blog, right? Create Google Blog was like Create React app, but for WordPress, where I helped developers start creating React based blogs in the PHP world and connecting React.js Webpack with PHP WordPress. Well, that's not easy, right? That Create Google Block got a lot of adoption early on. Like every 6 out of 10 plugins were being created, but for Gutenberg was being created on top of it. The last time I checked, it was like more than 30,000. I think 3,000. I could be wrong, right? And it just broke the entire flow, right? So I get the feeling of something similar happening in the Next.js community now. Next.js layouts feature is a big change. And if not done right, I think it has the potential of breaking that amazing Next.js or Vercel workflow that developers love to talk about. So, well, I'm creating this video to share what I'm thinking about this, and maybe if my friends at Vercel are watching this, maybe they could understand where I'm coming from, like, and how well executed this needs to be to actually really make Next.js really good. And I totally believe in them, right? So without further ado, let's quickly take a deep dive into the layouts RFC, right? So if you go to Next.js org log, you will find layouts RFC right there. You can Google it. And the gist of it is it has nested layouts, which will definitely allow you to build complicated applications. I've been a big fan of Next.js. I actually gave a talk on why Next.js is beyond Jamstack, and that both your blog and your actual SaaS application can be based on top of it, right? Well, Next.js layouts will make sure that this happens even more smoothly. Also, there's a lot of React 18 support in there. So this is designed for server components, which is amazing, definitely, right? It is going to improve data fetching. This is something new. Again, React 18 features like suspense, transition streaming, they're all going to become easier. But at the cost of what? Yeah, that's a part where which scares me a little bit. It is also going to have client and server routing. It will feel like an SPA, but it won't really be an SPA. It will have some sort of server support from React Server Components. And yeah, React works really well in Next.js, right? And it is going to be 100% incrementally adaptable, right? Adaptable. So yeah, this is super important, right? Exactly what I hope Next.js would do. We tried to do this in the WordPress community as well. We were like, okay, you can keep using the classic WordPress writing experience. We called it classic editor, right? And or you can just go with the main Gutenberg flow. But the entire thing was executed in a way that didn't really translate well and made a huge chunk of the community very hostile to the idea of working with Gutenberg. While the perception might be changing, as WordPress still owns more than 50% of, more than like 40% of the share of throughout the web, it's still something that drove a lot of amazing developers away from WordPress, right? I really don't want something like that to happen to Next.js, right? So yeah, and a lot of advanced routing patterns, which I am really excited about. Parallel routes, interceptable routes, and yeah, let's get into it. So I'm not gonna go through this entire blog post. You can definitely take it for a spin. Uh, you know how routing currently works. We have this pages folder in there. Every index.js file leads to a page, right? Uh, just like there's a dashboard folder which is creating a route, and then an index.js file that leads to this particular page, right? There are dynamic routes. You can potentially use some sort of layouting in there. Not a lot of great templating features on that, which is actually why the layouts RFC is there. This new feature is coming, right? And now what they're going to do is they're going to create an app folder, right? An app directory. This is extremely different, the new concept inside of Next.js, right? Where you will be able to use folders to define the routes. Uh, if I'm not wrong, there's going to be a root folder, and yeah, at the end there's going to be a leaf folder, right? This app folder is pretty interesting. There's going to be more conventions in here: layout JS, page JS, loading JS, error JS, a bunch of different things, right? So yeah, yeah. Again, as I said, I'm not gonna go into the detail of this RFC, but instead, what I'm gonna do is my good friend Lee from Vercel has written this blog post, Next.js Layout RFC in 5 minutes. Let's go over this and discuss both the good parts and my concerns in one go, right? So yeah, so Next.js. So what is exactly changing in layout? Next.js layout. Well, when you create routes with Next.js layout feature, what you will start with is an app directory, not a pages directory. Again, this app is very carefully thought. I think they've carefully thought about this as an app and not pages. Well, when I think about pages, I feel static and yeah, blog like. But when I think about app, it's literally in the name, right? SaaS app or an e-commerce app or whatnot uh, means it can take in more complicated things, which is what you're gonna see right now. So inside of an app, you create a page.js folder. This becomes the page, right? So for example, app slash page.js. Yeah, there you go. It's gonna render this particular page, the root segment, right? And the thing is, you can actually have more segments and leave segments in there, which is sort of similar to the pages directory that we have right now. But here is where the fun actually begins. When you're going to create layouts, in the app folder, you're going to create a layout.js file. This is going to be the layout of your entire app. And everything else that comes after that is probably going to be the child component of that layout, right? So as you see, this blue area, this nav, this is coming from, let's hope, this layout.js file. And in there, there's this blog directory. And this blog directory has its own layout.js file, which is, by the way, the child of this layout.js file, right? And this blog is actually creating the sidebar layout, right? And then there is a pages.js file which is going to create the entire page. This area. Let me actually show this part of the app, and the same dynamic routing would also work inside for a particular single company. So to make your first layout, you go and create a layout.js file. This is what the layout.js file looks like. It is accepting all the child components and putting them in the body, right? You can have all kind of fun in there, right? And then you create a page.js file which will be rendered here as the child to this particular layout, this particular layout, right? As you can see, we will highlight it here that this particular hello next.js is basically coming from the page.js file that we had created here, right? Yeah. Now what we can do is you can also share these layouts. But before we go there, like for example, the blog page.js file, which says blog posts and not hello next.js, still gonna use the same layout JS file in the parent app folder, but in the body, it is going to pass this particular component from this particular segment, which is going to be how you end up sharing layouts. I am not sure if you have checked, but this is potentially how the Vercel dashboard works. So here's my course on creating automation with Node CLI, and it is built with Next.js. So right now in here, I am looking at the Vercel dashboard. The moment I go to deployments or analytics or settings or wherever, you see everything up there, the layout, the main layout of this dashboard stays the same, right? So this is what you're going to be very easily able to do with sharing layouts with this new layouts RFC, this new layouts feature of Next.js, which is exciting as heck, right? But what you can also do is you can give another layout.js file to this particular segment, which will create a child layout inside of the parent layout, right? How this works is, for example, this particular layout.js file has a nav, a sidebar, and a sidebar nav, right? So what's happening is this part is actually coming from the app slash layout.js file, and this part is coming from the layout.js file inside the blog segment, whereas this heading is coming from the page.js inside of blog, which is, well, here. How this is happening is through child components, right? So the yeah, this is where it becomes tricky, right? And I hope developers are going to understand this concept. It's an amazing concept. It's very simple, but yeah, it's just a little bit too much convention in there, right? Which I both like and am afraid of, right? So here are the children props, which are going here, and this layout in itself is going to be rendered as a child to the main layout.js file, right? Yeah, lots of conventions here. This is what I'm talking about. I actually really like this. Why? Because just like 5 or 6 years ago, when I used to work with Create React app or some custom routing application, it was really hard to figure out how people have used their custom router or React router in there, right? And if a new developer would join the team, they would like spend a lot of time figuring out and mentally mapping all of the routing of this particular app, right? If you have ever built a documentation site with some scale of a content, like let's say more than 100 pages, and you've tried to build the entire sidebar nav in a static YAML or JSON file, well, you know what I'm talking about. That is what it used to feel like working with routing information in code. What Next.js did really, really well is they started working with these conventions, right? And these conventions are file system based, which makes the mental mapping breathe, right? And what I really like about this layout feature is that they're continuing to doing so. This is probably hopefully how they're going to make sure that this information still stays simple for developers to adopt, right? Okay, yeah, moving on. You go down there, we can see the same dynamic route that starts with this, square brackets, works in a very, very similar fashion. So this page.js file inside of this dynamic route is going to share the layout of blog, and the blog layout is going to be sharing the layout of app, right? Because each of these are children of each of right? If that makes any sense at all. What's more exciting is now this kind of features, the loading and error boundaries that are going to be part of this new Next.js release, is going to become very simple to implement, right? It's something you see all over Facebook or Instagram, where if something breaks, it's just that particular component, and if something is loading, it's just that particular component, right? Well, this layout mindset will make things easier. So a loading JS file will automatically wrap a page or a nested segment to React suspense boundary, which is amazing, right? Here's the code for that. Fallback loading, and you can see the loading animation here. I kind of hope, the kid in me hopes that there will be more conventions on top of it that could auto generate, loading UI. That would just make things super, super easy, right? And again, make or break with these custom features. And then there are very similar error.js file, which is the error boundary. If there's something wrong with the component, well, you can design it the way you like, and it will definitely give the users of your app, your site, a much, much better experience. So instead of your entire site being broken, just part of it or a particular component of it will look like this, right? You'll have a lot more control on this. Okay, moving down. This is probably the end of this 5 minutes blog post, and this is also where things are going to become interesting. One thing, as you see on the screen right now, route groups, right? These help you organize routes without affecting the URL path. Pretty amazing. I'm actually right now uh, working with one of my team members and dealing with exactly this issue in Next.js, where we want all of the information to be on the same page, but we don't really want a huge chunk of text. We want there to be chapters, right? So it's something I think this is going to make super sense, right? Uh, so it's something that is going to, like, route groups are going to make this really, really easy. You can also opt a segment out of a layout. But most importantly, now with this, you will be able to create multiple route layouts. This is amazing. Not only multiple route layouts for sections of an app, but they will also have a completely different UI. This is super, super helpful. Like, for example, every Next.js site I see out there, every blog I see out there, well, they try to publish a couple of pages. So they put pages, they put an index file in the pages. And what they do is they create a blog folder and then they put all of their blog posts in there. And I really dislike that kind of URL path, like yourname.com and then blog and then everything else. Well, I know it's your blog, right? Well, your name is not an app, so you're not gonna create an app against your personal domain. And it's just the URL looks too ugly to me, right? It's not a pretty URL. And while you can potentially hack it with a dynamic route uh, in the root folder of pages file, it definitely doesn't give you that much flexibility, which I think and I believe layouts feature is going to do. For example, here's the app, here's the checkout, and as you can see, both have very different layouts, but the URL is the same. And this is going to be amazing, right? So yeah, there you go. An app directory is going to use all of these concepts and a lot more as you go and read on the layouts RFC. You'll be able to load components in there like you do with a single page application. And well, there was a reason why SPS worked really well and didn't really work well, right? So it would be interesting to also see how Vercel Next.js are gonna make sure that the amount of JavaScript that is being put out through this particular experiment is almost negligible, because then it would actually make it super, super uh, important and optimizable. Well, isn't that what React server components are supposed to do? Yeah, I don't know, but I sure hope so, right? Moving on, this RFC actually touches on that bit as well. The client and server components convention. The app folder will support server, client, and share components. So as you see, the root segment is the server component. Then this particular component that is the child of that root segment is a client component, and then there's another server component, right? While this is gonna make things really, really fun, it is also going to complicate Next.js development a lot, because there's this thing called too much convention. I just hope that this is not that, right? It looks easy enough, and I hope this gets adopted in the right way as well, where you will be able to do, well, this layout is rendered on server, or this page is actually a client page. So yeah, so it's gonna completely change how you think about rendering patterns with Next.js. Yeah, it's both a good and a bad thing, right? With all of this new behavior, priority is definitely going to be a question in developers' mind with the current existing rendering patterns, especially OISR, ISR, the revalidation part. All of that is going to be something that developers are going to, think a little bit about before implementing, right? So One hope I have is that this will be executed in a good way where the documentation is up to date. They're probably going to have to version their documentation based on the app directory and the pages directory, which is no small task. Their documentation is huge, right? But executed well, I think it can definitely make Next.js even bigger than it is now. And there is all kinds of different amazing things in this RFC that I really encourage you to read, like parallel data fetching, which is going to make your website, your apps really really optimized and super fast. I do definitely encourage you to go ahead, check this RFC out, and share with me in comments and the community, like, what are your concerns on this. My major concern is, while all of this is good, I hope it is executed in a way that just makes sense and is easy to map mentally, right? If I have to remember a bunch of things like server components, client component, leaf segment is doing that, but what is happening with uh, my caching strategy and static revalidation? Yeah, it's just gonna be too much too soon. I hope that's not the case, right? So yeah, with that, I'm gonna leave you with this thought and with this expectation that you're gonna go read this layout RFC, contribute your thought to it either on the RFC or in comments here, or maybe even tweet about it, and let me know what you think. But goes without saying, big thanks to the folks who are working on this, Tim, Sebastian, and Lee's team. It's just amazing what you folks are trying to pull off. And I am just super, super excited to see what comes next. With that, I'm going to say bye. Use your code for good. Peace.